President William Howard Taft, Joseph Stalin, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and Mr. Monopoly. What does this rather eclectic group of historical figures, if you'll allow me to stretch the term for a company mascot, all have in common? They each sport a very particular, very recognizable style accessory on their upper lip, the handlebar mustache. Today, generally thought of as a go-to fashion accessory for the contemporary subculture of so-called hipsters, who might wear the mustache to mock standard fashion trends, or as a nod to a nostalgic yearning for the past, the handlebar mustache does indeed have a long history. Probably longer than you might think, actually, as similarly styled mustaches are depicted on ancient statues of the Iron Age Celts. But it was in the 18th and 19th century when the handlebar, so named, not surprisingly, for its resemblance to the handlebars of classic bicycles, really came into public prominence. During the Victorian and Edwardian eras, the gentlemen of Great Britain would frequently sport a handlebar mustache as a sign of their upper-class social status. Over in America, though, the mustache took on a more macho, rough-and-tumble image when, during the late 19th century, it became best associated with legendary lawman Wyatt Earp and Wild West showman Buffalo Bill. Since then, the handlebar mustache has periodically enjoyed moments of great attention from being found on the faces of various celebrities, political figures, and athletes. Arguably one of the most famous handlebar mustaches in history was the one sported by pitcher Raleigh Fingers, who initially grew the mustache in 1972 while playing for the Oakland A's, to win a $300 Best Facial Hair prize offered by the team owner. Fingers would grow to love the look, though, and keep it for the rest of his career. While not as popular today as it was during its 19th century heights, the handlebar continues to be a beloved goal of many mustache wearers, and not just the aforementioned hipsters. In fact, it remains popular enough to still justify the ongoing existence of the Handlebar Club, a gentleman's club founded in London in 1947, which is open to anyone with, as they say, a hirsute appendage of the upper lip with graspable extremities, and whose stated mission is to promote the notion that men with mustaches are men of good character. If you ever do take the step to grow a handlebar mustache yourself, and subsequently find yourself attending one of the Handlebar Club's still monthly meetings at London's Heron Bar and Restaurant, and while there you find yourself struggling to think of a good conversation starter to engage with your fellow handlebar mustachioed gentlemen, perhaps you can ask them their opinions of a rather recent movie which was arguably meant to be one of the handlebar's most prominent moments of fame and public attention. For not only is the handlebar mustache worn by the film's titular character a running topic of conversation throughout the movie, but the advertising campaign for this would-be franchise starter was even built around a series of posters showing every main character, man and woman alike, sporting the striking facial hair. The year is 2015, and Lionsgate Films are ready to launch the next big action comedy franchise with Mortdecai. 10, Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
Objection, hearsay.
Oh, hearsay, your favorite word. All right.
Yeah, hearsay. I don't know who you are. This is an audio podcast, and you're not on video, so I actually don't know who you are. But this is Chris.
Yes. And Chris, I know both of us are going to pour a mega pint today because we're going to need it to start our new theme month. First, before we can get to the movie, do you want to tell the folks what our theme month is and why we're watching this movie today?
Yes, of course. We, in the month of May, we are looking at May the Farce Be With You. So including 2015's Mortdecai, which is today we're talking about, and then next episode we'll be talking about 2015's Vacation.
What a great idea this was.
Oh, yes. The summer of laughs.
Yes. Well, do you want to tell us a little bit about 2015's Mortdecai?
It is directed by David Koepp. Most film people know his name as a famous writer of such classics of Jurassic Park, Mission Impossible, Spider-Man. Which one, you say? Well, who knows? There's a million now. The first one. But this is his sixth directorial feature. He actually worked with Johnny Depp on Secret Window, which kind of caused this to happen. The inciting incident.
One of, yes.
It is written by Eric Aronson. He most famously wrote a Lance Bass and Joey Fatone rom-com from 2001. And that's about it. Mm-hmm. This was based on the book series from the 1970s by Kirill Bonfiglioli. The names of the books are Don't Point That Thing at Me, After You with the Pistol, Something Nasty in the Woodshed, and The Great Mustache Mystery.
Yeah. And I think it's actually, this is weird because I'm so glad you said his name because I think his name
I'm the
is
Italian,
Cyril.
so I got the last name right.
Well, I was looking because he was born, like his birth name is Cyril with a C, and it looks like for some reason he changed it to the K as his pen name. So yeah, I would look at it too and think it's Kirill, but I'm just going to pronounce it Cyril Bonfiglioli. Sure. And essentially he was, in real life, he was an English art dealer and a magazine editor. And so he wrote this series of novels about a character named Mortdecai. And I haven't read any of the novels, but from everything I've seen, apparently they had a very big cult following almost as soon as they were published. And they are about like an aristocratic art dealer who ends up going on these adventures, always having to do with art forgeries or the secret criminal underworld of the art dealing world. Him and his manservant Jock. And apparently they're very heavily influenced or compared to the books of P.J. Wodehouse, who I kind of know from working in a bookstore, but also his like kind of famous literary character was Jeeves, and that was made into a TV show called Jeeves and Wooster, starring Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry, and that was about like a very aristocratic kind of nitwit and his butler or valet, who is like so much more competent in all their adventures, and so you can see that connection to the Mortdecai character and Jock, and where those kind of where those connections come from. The reason I'm talking about this so much is I'm guessing most of our listeners have not heard of this because from what I saw, Mortdecai was definitely not a series that was well known in America, or not that I'm saying we only have American listeners, but I think in general, this was very much a cult sensation. It's not like this was, oh, clearly this is Hunger Games. Everyone loves this book series. Let's make a movie of it. But it had a small audience. So,
well, the small audience goes into the budget and the people who came out to see the movie. The budget of the film is $60 million. Most goes to salaries, which we will get to later. Domestically, this film made $7.7 million, and then worldwide it made $47.2 million. So this was quite a big bomb, especially stateside. Stateside.
And at the time, it was really notable, and this leads us into our next topic of conversation, obviously the man of the hour topic of conversation. At the time, this was kind of notable as being the fifth bomb in a row for its leading man. So this was kind of like really like a turning point in a career, and that's obviously a career we want to talk about, and that is the career of Johnny Depp. Now, I don't know, Chris, with this thing with like Hancock being our first episode in April Showers Bring April Powers, of course with Will Smith right after the slap, and now we're talking about Johnny Depp at a time where he's embroiled in his own kind of news brouhaha. I don't think either of us want to talk about that too much. I think we would both agree that, yes, of course, there are some elements to the trial that are kind of, meme-worthy and funny. We already alluded to some of them. But I'm very much aware, however you feel about the trial, however you feel about whatever the outcome is, that's a little bit more of it's an iffy topic for people. It is a very serious, it's much more serious to me of a topic than the slap, right? So, but I do think it's an interesting opportunity for us to just talk about Johnny Depp, the performer, and Johnny Depp, the actor, because we haven't had an opportunity yet. Well, there's some other Johnny Depp movies we'll be looking at. We're gonna mention one of them in a moment, I think, when we talk about this is the place of his career and his string of bombs. But I guess I would just ask you quickly, Chris, I'll talk about my feelings in a moment, but where do you fall with Johnny Depp in general, like in terms of going way back, right? What's your kind of ongoing relationship with Johnny Depp, just on the acting side?
I mean, my familiarity with Johnny Depp goes back to, honestly, junior high. And for me, when Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl came out, I was in grade 9. So that was really when he was made aware. Like, I was made aware of him. He was so popular at the time. And obviously, like, worldwide, we all know Jack Sparrow, right? Captain Jack Sparrow. And I think that's when it really hit. And like I remember, like all of my friends, like all my girlfriends, like having pictures of him as Jack Sparrow in their lockers. Like that was a mainstay in junior high. So I think that's where it goes back to me at like the earliest. Obviously, before I've gone back and watched older movies and yada yada, like What Eats Gilbert Grape and whatnot. But that was when he was made aware to me. And I've always kind of liked Johnny Depp. I like his screen presence. I like his comedic timing. We'll get to that in this film. Because this is actually, I have to just kind of sidebar a little bit. Not sidebar because he's in a trial right now. But this is our first straight up comedy we've talked about, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
well, yeah.
Okay. Spoilers. But yeah, I like him. I understand from the later Pirates on until now, I think maybe the general populace is kind of maybe tired of the shtick.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it is. And like I said, like this movie obviously bombed financially and critically. And I think that might have a lot to do with it. Because again, I do like Johnny Depp. Regardless of his legal troubles and this and that, I like seeing him, but I think maybe it's enough is enough. I love Sweeney Todd. I think that's a movie that is just absolutely wonderful. I do not like musicals. You know me, famously, I do not like musicals, but I love that Sweeney Todd does that the musical thing of like they're just kind of singing their lines. Like I love that instead of like breaking out into song and doing like a little dance for the camera. But yeah, it started to crumble, honestly, for me with Alice in Wonderland. That's what I'm noticing. That is one of my least favorite theater experiences of my life.
I'm so happy has a sequel so that we don't have to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. I felt personally attacked in that movie. That's how bad I fucking hate that movie. But yes, other than that, that's probably my brief history with him. How about you?
Yeah, so this is because you often like to bring up as a joke our age difference, but I think this is an instance where our age difference is actually very, very helpful. Because it's very, very intriguing to me to talk to someone younger than me and hear that idea of someone really getting into Johnny Depp with Pirates of the Caribbean. That's kind of exciting because I was obviously aware of him before that. And I'm not saying this to sound like Johnny Depp hipster or anything. This is just true. For a very long time, Johnny Depp was my favorite actor. And that predates Pirates of the Caribbean. So when you hear this discussion of Johnny Depp, I am one of the people that would speak to this in the past. I remember and was very much of the camp of people who defended Johnny Depp as an actor who Hollywood should give more roles to, right? So like that run of, obviously I probably, I probably saw like 21 Jump Street on TV, but I was never a fan of it. He really did come to my attention with Crybaby and Edward Scissorhands, that kind of both coming out in 1990. Edward Scissorhands went and saw it with my parents. I was only 10 when it came out, but obviously a 10-year-old, that's like the perfect way to see when you're 10. It's just so amazing and so fascinating. I mean, I still have that movie today, but it was so fantastical. And then Crybaby was a movie that bombed in theaters, but kind of immediately was on cable a lot. And there was just something about I still love that movie today. That's like arguably it's like tied with Serial Mom as my favorite John Waters movie. So I was like pretty into him really early on. I remember even going to see Benny and June in the theater with my parents. Loved Ed Wood. Ed Wood is, to me, I point to that as still as I think that's Johnny Depp's best performance. But I was very much in that run of like with stuff like Ed Wood and Dead Man and Nick of Time. Especially then Donnie Brasco and like how great that was, and then Fear and Loathing, which is another one of my favorite performances. I am just going through his filmography, I realize, but it's all to speak to. I remember that time period when it was like, oh, this guy's so awesome, but there were so many articles published at the time where like everybody respects Johnny Depp, everyone loves Johnny Depp, but he's box office poison. Because one thing that's true about most of the movies I just mentioned is almost all of them bombed. He kept doing these like great movies, really interesting performances. In fact, a little bit of trivia about me. My other podcast, I can't believe I'm mentioning this 2 podcasts in a row, but my other podcast, Days of Future podcast, is an X-Men podcast with my friend Joe. My buddy Joe does not like Johnny Depp. He's always been in the mentality that he thinks Johnny Depp just gives the same performance and everything, and I've always defended against that, even going back to the beginning. And the original podcast I pitched to him is I wanted to do a podcast that was just entirely dedicated to us going through Johnny Depp's entire filmography and me trying to convince him he's a good actor. That obviously didn't happen. I wanted to call it Deep in Depp, but yeah, that one didn't happen. So all this is to say, I know I'm rambling. I'll start wrapping up, but I remember the excitement of Pirates of the Caribbean hitting. And I also, this wouldn't mean as much to you, Chris, but I do remember, you might have heard this too, when Pirates of the Caribbean was first announced, everyone thought that was like a terrible idea. Oh my God, Disney's making a movie out of a theme park ride? Like, what is this? And I don't remember what the movie was, but I do remember being in the theater and the trailer for that movie coming up, and people laughing at the idea, because like, it was just an initial teaser and it had like barely any footage. But it said Pirates of the Caribbean, and the theater laughed. They were like, they're making a movie out of that, and then the cast list came up, and when Johnny Depp's name came up, you could actually hear the theater go, oh, I guess that's kind of legit then, because even if the movies were bombing, people did think of him as like not blockbuster guy, right? Guy who makes interesting, bizarre movies. So people suddenly like, oh, I guess that is something to pay attention to. And yeah, that when Pirates of the Caribbean hit that summer, and I know we've mentioned this before, I still, to this day, my trilogy of like perfect blockbuster films is Men in Black, The Mummy, and Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl. Yeah. I just think those 3 movies are like 3 perfect summer blockbusters. Obviously, there's more like Jurassic Park, but those are the 3 that always like pop into my mind. It's just, there's something about them, they're so infinitely rewatchable and perfect for what that kind of summer blockbuster is. And boy, man, I was so happy to see that validation for him. Yeah. And like, him become an actual leading man off of a performance where even the stories, remember how like Disney hated that performance and they wanted him fired, and he was just like, nope, just let me do my thing. I promise you it'll work out. And him getting an Oscar nomination off of it, and it being like just a turning point. I want to finally let you talk again, Chris, but that was just so exciting. And then it led into, a really good string there for a while. And then, as you said, there was a turning point for me where suddenly, and I think this will get into, we have some quotes from him and some elements, it started to be, for someone who was my favorite actor for so long, it started to get a little depressing. Right? Yeah. Because I did feel like suddenly, and there's lots of ways we could talk about this and start to try and trace it. And we could talk about like what his personal issues are and things, how it ties into this. But he did, to me, start to become emblematic of everything he used to say he hated and like rallied against in Hollywood. Does that make sense to you? Like there was like a definite turning point where he was always the guy who was like, I'm anti-blockbuster, but if I'm going to do blockbusters, I at least want them to be really weird and try something different. And then suddenly just felt like, oh no, he's actually starting to fall into the kind of self-parody that he was always like speaking out against. Yeah.
Well, that's the word I was going to use, is self-parody. And I think like just recently, last week, just randomly, I was like, you know what? I'm going to watch Dead Man's Chest. I'm going to watch Pirates of the Caribbean 2, which is my actual... I know objectively Curse of the Black Pearl is a masterpiece of blockbuster filmmaking. I know that. Like, there's no denying that. Subjectively, Dead Man's Chest is my favorite. I just think it's a wild movie.
I love it too. Yeah. And even like for like how often the modern blockbusters are just kind of CGI gobbledygook spectacle. And go watch that wagon wheel sequence in Dead Man's Chest again, the sword fight on the wagon wheel, and that's just like one of the best things.
Yes, it's incredible. It's incredible. And I think after the Pirates movies, and then also his relationship with Tim Burton, I think we have to really talk about that, because Tim Burton kind of did the same with me. Okay, I've loved Tim Burton for a long time, but I think at the moment that they made Alice in Wonderland, I can't stress this enough, but that in the 1-2 punch of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Alice in Wonderland. I know Sweeney Todd was in between, but I don't care because that movie is actually good. But I think the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Alice in Wonderland were so misguided and so terrible. And if you like those movies, you're wrong, but that's fine. You're allowed to be wrong.
I don't hate Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I don't hate it. I'll say that.
And that's okay. That's fine. Yeah. I'll allow you to say that. But Alice in Wonderland is an abomination.
It's unforgivable.
Yes. Yeah. And I think Tim Burton also became self-parody, and it became this like, a new Tim Burton movie's coming out. Oh, okay, he's going to hire his wife. He's going to hire Johnny Depp. He's going to have a pail of white makeup to splash over everybody, and it's going to look the exact same, and it's going to be bad. Yeah. And I think with that combination, and I love when directors pair with actors. Like, I think that's awesome, and I think it works. It usually works out really nicely. But I think they're both so significant. Johnny Depp has such a certain style, and so does Tim Burton, that I think them colliding so many times just made it friggin' exhausting. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's what happened with Johnny Depp. He became exhausting. So then when he went on, oh my God, Dark Shadows? Like, do we have to talk about that movie one day?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Probably. But I think this, like, we're going to talk about some of the bombs, right? Like, again, The Rum Diary bombed. Dark Shadows bombed. The Lone Ranger bombed. We have to actually talk about that one. I know that. Yep. Transcendence, horrible piece of junk. And I mean, like, even Black Mass. Like, again, I know we're listing off his filmography, but I think we just have to stress, like, how much Johnny Depp works. You know what I mean? Like, he's always working. 1 to 2 movies a year, it feels like we're coming out at a certain time. And, he just became self-parody. And especially even, like, with Fantastic Beasts, when that came out, and he's playing Grindelwald. And, again, pale makeup. Looking weird. Yep. Being stupid. And it's just enough is enough. and that it's an unfortunate timeline for him.
Even Black Mask, which is a performance I like, and I think it's an okay movie. You know, it's like it's a fairly decent mid-budget. But like then you look at him and it's like all the talk was about that makeup job, and then you look at the real Whitey Bulger and you're like, why did he do that? He doesn't look like Whitey Bulger. They made him look like a monster, right?
Yeah.
He looks like Nosferatu or something. And yeah, he really is to me. You can say this on multiple levels because this, I think, speaks into his personal life as well. And again, we don't want to get too much into that, but I think he's very much a victim of success.
Yes.
When I think about what you're just saying about his connection and his partnership with Tim Burton, what I said, like Edward Scissorhands, Ed Wood, they should have just made movies about Eds because those two were great, right? And then Sleepy Hollow, which is like actually one of my favorite Tim Burton movies. But as I was saying, there was something on a certain like psychological level where when they were making movies that were good but weren't exactly hitting with audiences, although Sleepy Hollow was a hit, but you know, like a more modest hit, I suppose.
Yep.
But they weren't huge blockbusters, and it kind of made you feel like you were part of this like cool like little underground where like, why doesn't anyone realize how great these two are together, you know? And then the problem was Pirates of the Caribbean, which was not a Tim Burton movie, it was a Gore Verbinski film. But the reaction to that movie meant that suddenly Johnny Depp was in that rare era of a Hollywood star where anything he wanted to star in would get greenlit. Mm-hmm. And that gave him and Tim Burton, his frequent collaborator, more of a blank check to work with. And suddenly nobody would say no to them, and they could just go off and keep working together and keep indulging. And then he was getting like, and then he just kept doing more and more Pirates of the Caribbean movies. And yeah, suddenly, like just this run, right? Like Finding Neverland's in 2004, but let me just read this run right here, right? From 2005 to about 2010. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Pirates of the Caribbean 2, Pirates of the Caribbean 3, Sweeney Todd, Public Enemies, okay, then Alice in Wonderland, as you said. Now, I like some of those, but Public Enemies, I guess, is him trying to do like a little bit of a, you know, smaller Michael Mann gangster drama. But in general, what you don't hear in there is the kind of really interesting, like smaller, you know, there's no more chocolates in there. Yeah. There's no more Blow. There's no more Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And then when when his career starts to like go like in a little bit of a downturn, or he wants to bring those in, he starts picking to be like, I feel like clearly the wrong ones, you know, like movies like The Tourist and The Rum Diary, and it just gets to a certain point where like, oh no, like I remember this like demarcation point of like, do I not like this guy anymore? Like this sucks, because like suddenly, and then the more and more the Pirates series went on, like,
well that's the thing. Like again, he became the main character.
Yep.
And I think that's why he works so well in 1, 2, and I mean 3 is terrible, but he's, you know, I mean, let's not talk about 3, but I think Disney knew that he was the selling point. Mm-hmm. So then they started designing the movies around him. Yeah. And he was always great as a supporting player. Right. That is the best, like one of the greatest supporting characters in film history. Yeah. And as soon as they bumped him up to main star in this, it became exhausting. And I like the Johnny Depp Jack Sparrow shtick. I do like it. Mm-hmm. But then at some point I'm watching, and all these movies became so bloated and so big, and I'm watching 2.5 hours of him acting like Keith Richards. It just gets too much. And then his name is synonymous with Jack Sparrow. His typecast is a thing, but he's accepting of the typecast because he's playing goofy characters all the time. He never, like you said, he's never going back to just the more interesting, smaller roles, you know? And like you said, with Public Enemies, the only thing I remember that movie is really the trailer, because the song, I think the song trailer was awesome. And then it was like too little too late. You know what I mean? Like, it was too little too late. We know him as the Pirates guy. That's Jack Sparrow. And that's why people don't really come out for his non-goofy roles. You know? Like I in the research, you know, we've said, you know, how much it made. It did horribly stateside. But there was somebody, I can't remember the article, but somebody had put like a chart together of his successes and failures. And it sounds like, you know, worldwide, people are more accepting of him versus in the U.S. And they were always more accepting of his goofy, weird, eccentric roles, right?
Well, because those roles tend to be in these kind of like big blockbusters that always do play better to a global audience, right? Because we like American movies that are just built on spectacle sometimes sell better to an international audience because there's no cultural considerations that they have to worry about. They're just like, I'm going to go see an American act like an idiot with explosions around him. And that's kind of what a lot of these later ones were.
And in saying that, like Depp is very aware of the success of Pirates. He was quoted here in 2014. It's like being a dog at the track. They expect you to live up to some race you happen to be in and won accidentally. From that first second, you're nothing more than a commodity. They have expectations of another Pirates. It's great if something works. Boy, that's killer. But God, to have that as your design, it's ugly, I think. Mm-hmm. So again, he's aware of the success, but it's almost like a blessing and a curse, right? He's making hundreds of millions of dollars, but that's all people see of him. So he's like, fuck, I got to chase that dragon all the time now.
Yeah, I hear that quote and it really bums me out because I think he's saying the exact right thing, but there's like a weird irony or hypocrisy. I'm not sure which to that quote because he says like, oh, I'm a commodity now. They want me to make more pirates. That's great, but it's kind of it's great that pirates worked, but it's ugly that that's all they want. But then he just does it, right?
Yeah.
And I think it very much is. I don't want to fault him too much because I get it. He is someone who really tread the boards for a long time, right? Like he was making a lot of movies that were getting good critical response. People liked him, and these movies weren't hitting. And I don't blame him for suddenly having a hit and being like, oh my God, like how long is this going to last? I need to cash my chips in right now. But it is weird that he was always in the past such an idiosyncratic, interesting actor who is so against like the Hollywood system. And even in that quote, he's like, it's ugly that they want me to just become like a Hollywood like blockbuster player. But he's like, well, I guess I'll take advantage of it in the moment. And I do think, I know I can't say this for sure, but I do believe that he had the clout post Pirates to do more interesting stuff than what he did. I think he could have done the Pirate sequels and also then mixed in movies like Chocolat, Yep. And I think it's just like he was like afraid that he was like, well, I worked for decades and like nothing hit. Maybe this is only going to last for about 10 years. And really it only did last about 10 years for him. Mm-hmm. So maybe he's like, in that 10 years, I better just make all the big crap I can and shore up this money.
Yeah, but also if you have a mortgage on an island.
Yes, well,
I think you almost have to do Pirates movies.
This is where we said too. His personal issues obviously get into it. He definitely was a man who I don't want to say, like again, whatever, but definitely
he likes to spend money. He likes to spend money.
He's definitely a man controlled by excess at a certain point.
Yes,
in a lot of different ways, and that speaks to like even the movies he picked. Maybe
I will have you know that I am not an alcoholic. I am drunk, and there is a vast difference. In my defense, I was drugged. I was not drinking until the plane.
And in the car.
And a bit in the car.
And in the ambassador's residence.
And in the ambassador's residence.
And yeah, your point about, and this will tie into like what we're actually going to say about this movie. So this actually does have a theme. But this idea of Jack Sparrow working so well as a supporting character. And then the misunderstanding of the Pirate sequels, right? Because you're dead right that what every Pirates movie should have been, I don't think Will Turner was interesting enough to be the main character moving forward. But that could have been a really fun series where you get a new main character every time. And Jack Sparrow's always like the annoying like side character who's pissing this character off, right?
Yeah.
And it could have been like a very interesting vehicle where like, hey, here's our new hero for this film, and Jack Sparrow's again the nuisance who's in the way. And they made two crucial mistakes of elevating Jack Sparrow to lead role and also thinking that what people liked about the first one was overcomplicated mythology. Why is the third movie? I know we don't talk about the third movie, but I'll talk about it for just 10 seconds here. Why do I need flowcharts to follow a Pirates of the Caribbean movie? Yeah. The first one is like so simple, and the sequels just kind of really go up their own ass in mythology. So, crucial mistakes. Yeah, too much doing the same thing over and over. It really did start to fall apart. And you just mentioned you mentioned the other films. Suddenly he had a string of bombs, and people were kind of writing op-ed pieces about what's happened to Johnny Depp. From being like the biggest star in the world to suddenly, yikes.
Now, Mortdecai. Okay. The Pirates of the Caribbean is actually, like, weirdly an inception point for this film. He was gifted by his co-star, Jack Davenport, a bunch of these novels. And
while they're making Curse the Black Pearl, correct? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And right away, Depp is like, I need to make this movie. And it did take a long time. It took 10 years to make it. In July 2013, the screenwriter kind of put two things together, I guess, from the two different books. I had mentioned before, one is Don't Point That Thing at Me. That's the first book. But then the last book, he introduced a certain plot point, which we'll get to, the great Mortdecai mustache mystery into it. And then Depp sends the script to David Koepp, who he just worked with on Secret Window, and then it gets a green light. Principal photography starts October 2013. And this movie's filmed pretty quickly and kind of done with because Lionsgate and Odd Lot Entertainment sold the picture in 2013 at the American Film Market. Mm-hmm. Now, they sold it and with a few other movies that we might actually have to talk about. but Lionsgate had great success in 2013. They sold Gods of Egypt. I know we'll have to talk about that movie one day. And then they also sold Point Break. I never watched that one. Probably will try never to ever.
Yeah.
And then this is one of the funnier things. This movie was slated to come out January 23rd of 2015, and then it was pushed a couple weeks. Guess why, Trev?
Oh, why is that?
It was pushed because Jupiter Ascending, a failure to franchise alum, moved into that spot. So they wanted to avoid the mega success of that film. Jokes on them. And this is the weird thing about Mortdecai. This movie is an R-rated film. Mm-hmm. And I think we really need to touch on that because the marketing that started with this film is so bizarre. Mm-hmm. It's so strange. And I actually had completely forgotten about the marketing until doing the research for this. I'm sure you did as well. Mm-hmm. And the marketing campaign makes it seem like it's this really silly slapstick comedy, and also that we should know who the fuck Mortdecai is.
Yes.
That's the weird part. This we mentioned before. This string of novels nobody has ever heard of. Maybe maybe a small little bit, mm-hmm. But this movie was meant to be a mega blockbuster franchise. In February of 2014, Lionsgate chairman John Feltheimer says that he expects Mortdecai to spawn an entire film series, calling the foppish protagonist a franchisable character in the vein of the Pink Panther's Inspector Clouseau.
Yes. A comparison point I will bring up again, for sure.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about this marketing campaign. Let's talk about the tweets, the Twitter.
This is fascinating. The official Mortdecai Twitter account, this episode was worth it alone for me to learn about the Mortdecai Twitter account.
Yes.
So Chris, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the official Mortdecai Twitter account that popped up to promote this film?
Yes. August 6th, 2014, at Part-Time Rogue. The official Mortdecai Twitter account makes its debut in a characteristically inept fashion. A message too long for a single tweet. It says here, "Greetings. Allow me the pleasure of introducing myself. I am the Honorable Charlie Mortdecai, as it is often customary that someone of my..."
Yep,
that's it.
Now, so I stared at this tweet, and I was thinking, because I was like, Is this really that the person running this account fucked up like on the first tweet and tried to type too much and then just hit send, was like whatever, like it didn't notice it wasn't all there? Or is it meant to be a joke about how inept Mortdecai is? And if that's the case, the problem is that as you just alluded to, there's no reason for any of us to know that because we don't know who Mortdecai is. Mm-hmm. So if it's a joke, it doesn't work. So right off the bat, the very first tweet of the account, I think it's just a head scratcher. Like you just look at it and you're like, wait, huh? Like it's very, very bizarre.
And that doesn't stop the Twitter account, though. They go on and they start, for months, they talk about the Golden Globes. They talk about the premiere of Parks and Recreation. Yeah. It just becomes this weird commentary on things that are happening in pop culture. It's odd, and it's never like doing hashtags, right? Like Johnny Depp, hashtag this, hashtag that. It's actively trying to fool the audience to think that Mortdecai is tweeting, but even his handle is Part-Time Rogue.
Yeah.
Like, even that is baffling. Like just say it's at Mortdecai or something. I don't really understand. It goes on for a bunch of months. And then in January 15th of 2015, I guess Lionsgate is realizing that this Twitter account's not working. Okay. And they're like, there's nobody talking about this movie. So they cancel all the advanced screenings of the film. So right after Lionsgate cancels the advanced screenings, Vulture, the publication, writer Abraham Reisman, He asks a simple question. What the hell is Mortdecai? They're acting like Mortdecai is some kind of major franchise that we're already supposed to be jazzed about. Maybe I'm living in a bubble, but I have never met a single person who has any prior knowledge, let alone name brand recognition, of Mortdecai. Mm-hmm. And then, obviously, in the early 2015, American Sniper opens and just dominates the box office, and that's all.
Do you remember
anybody wants
that?
to talk
Like
about.
how gigantic that movie was? Yeah.
Oh yes. I remember seeing that at a screening. I got like free tickets, free passes to, and the place.
You love
was
that little fake baby, right? That fake baby was your favorite character.
The fake baby was pretty good. If the fake baby was tweeting, I would have latched on to Mortdecai.
Yeah.
January 23rd, Mortdecai arrives in theaters. Bad reviews, bad everything.
Chris.
Yeah.
Bad reviews is an understatement. Unbelievably atrocious reviews, let's just say. And a horrible cinema score, too. And, you have to take that into account because you and I, as people who pay attention to this kind of stuff, it doesn't take a lot to get a decent cinema score. You know, most movies are kind of fine for cinema scores. And it's kind of that thing where people say, oh man, if you get a B+ cinema score, that's considered not great, right? Because most audiences just give everything an A, right? They're just so happy to be out of the house and watch a movie. Mortdecai gets a C+ cinema score. Yeah, that's bad. That's bad. And then and I know I like anyone else who's really into movies, I have my issues with Rotten Tomatoes. It's not, you should never trust it as the ultimate arbiter of what's good or bad. But when you look at a Rotten Tomatoes score for a movie that is meant to be a franchise and you see it has 11%, not a good sign. Not a good sign at all. So, this comes out to terrible reviews and, as you're about to mention, probably even worse box office.
Oh, yes. I think Trev mentioned it before, but this was... Mortdecai is the worst opening for a major Depp film in 15 years.
Yeah.
That's substantial.
What, Chris, can you tell the audience, what number in the top 10 of that weekend does Mortdecai open at?
It's 9th, right?
Yep, number 9.
Yeah, 9th.
Yep.
9. Yeah, not good.
Yeah.
That doesn't stop Part-Time Rogue from continuing to tweet. Because it's such low numbers, it starts to retweet every now and then somebody will say that they liked the movie. So it starts to retweet it and saying, you should go see it again. And then the last tweet. This is my favorite.
Yeah.
The last tweet is January 25th. So literally, a week? Maybe 2 weeks after it opens at that point? No, not even. 2 days. Sorry, what am I talking
2 days. It's the weekend, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's 2 days after the film opens. The last tweet from @PartTimeRogue. Mm-hmm. Jock and I were enjoying a very engrossing mafia program he introduced me to, but I believe the cable went out. What happens in the diner?
So as this movie's franchise fortunes are collapsing, as the reviews are a dumpster fire, as any sensible studio would try to be figuring out how to what can we save here? The Mortdecai Twitter account's responses, let's make a joke about the Sopranos finale in 2015, which, for the record, the Sopranos finale happened in 2007. And I think by 2015... jokes about the Sopranos finale, I think by 2008, jokes about the Sopranos finale were already old hat. So, again, another baffling tweet in a string of them.
Do you want to just get into this movie now?
I think we have to. We can't put it off anymore. We'll talk about the rest of the cast on the other side of this and just our general thoughts. But yeah, let's dive into the mustache mystery.
3 months ago, a Spanish museum sent a Goya painting to be cleaned. Painting has disappeared. This is a very bad man who wanted to fund violent worldwide revolution. Countless lives are at stake.
And you would like me to find it?
Precisely.
What is in it for me, as they say?
Do it for Queen and country.
No. All right, Queen and country, travel and living expenses, reasonable overhead.
Done.
I am Lord Charlie Mortdecai. Respected by all who know me slightly.
Excellent shot, sir!
Man down! I am an art dealer, an aficionado. My wife, Joanna,
My only true love.
I thought I'd see how you secret agent men run the world.
I'm afraid I shall have to put my foot down, darling.
Sorry.
With your permission, of course.
Jock is my manservant and handles all of our most pressing affairs.
Well done, Jock. I am also on the verge of bankruptcy.
And therefore, we need a fiendishly clever plan to secure our reward.
We grab the painting when no one's looking.
Ingenious.
Charismatic British aristocrat and part-time shady art dealer, Charlie Mortdecai, suffers from a constant lack of funds to support his lavish lifestyle. So when Alistair Maitland, a college friend and now MI5 officer, asks him to find a stolen Goya painting, he accepts. But Charlie's not the only one with eyes for the painting, as a race has begun between multiple parties, for the artwork is rumored to contain the code to a bank account filled with Nazi gold.
Yes, Mortdecai. As I start to talk, I should just point out really quickly, if this seems like an extra spooky episode as we record, that's simply because where I'm recording, there is a massive thunderstorm going on right now. So I apologize if you hear thunder in the background, but hey, I can't control the weather, right? So Chris, if you don't mind, I'll start by talking about Mortdecai, which I know was a first-time watch for both of us, right? Mm-hmm. We had not seen this until now. I kind of chuckled earlier, or made some kind of allusion to the fact that I kind of called into question. You said this is the first comedy we've watched, because it is meant to be a comedy. I will say I don't think I laughed once. This is one of the worst movies we've done, in my opinion. I found this to be so painfully unfunny, and it was that thing where I was approaching it wondering, whenever a movie has a reputation this bad, I kind of tend to go in thinking, could it really be that bad? Could it be as atrocious as everyone makes it out to be? Maybe it's like there's something where people don't, hey, I'm someone who defends Freddy Got Fingered, right? Where I'm like, hey, that's kind of like an misunderstood masterpiece, deconstruction of comedy. Maybe that's what Mortdecai was going for. No, Mortdecai is a very, very unfortunate example of an ego project, and we've already alluded to this a lot in the beginning, but as we talk more specifically, we'll get into performances and things like that. But this is ultimately a misunderstanding from everybody involved about how much people are going to like this character, how much people are going to be willing to put up with one joke on repeat for almost 2 hours, and how much this is like a franchise just immediately hitting the ground running, because the movie very much treats it that way, and I think that actually keeps getting in the way. This movie's not actually setting up the character in a way that makes him compelling. The movie's acting like this is Mortdecai Part 4, and we're already on board, but we're not on board, and nothing this movie's doing gets us on board. I'm going to say even probably more mean things about it as we go on, but I'll say this. I was pretty miserable watching it, and I will admit this. I had to rewind this movie a couple times, which made it an even worse experience, because I think this movie hits that weird mark for me where it's both boring and overly complicated. I thought the plot, I was really having a hard time following this plot. And there were at least 3 times where I rewound about 5 minutes because I was like, I feel like I missed something here. And I'll tell you, all 3 of those times, it didn't help. So all I was doing was prolonging this experience for myself. But I was I really had a hard time following this movie. And I think that's just because my eyes were glossing over watching it. I did not look at my phone, but oh my God, this was one of the movies where it was so tempting to start scrolling through Twitter or something, because I just wanted to get away from it. So I didn't like it. So Chris, why don't you tell us about your feelings of Mortdecai?
I'm going to say off the bat, I'm not going to be so visceral about.
Oh my God, is this podcast about to end?
Hold on. No, because it's bad. It's bad. Okay, let me just say it's bad. Yeah, I'm not a moron today. But I felt this movie is very just okay. And it's this very, I almost said, I wrote here in my notes, it's harmless, inconsequential, okay romp at the movies. Its biggest fault is the plot. Like you said, the plot is just nonsense. It's just absolute nonsense. And I think when you have a caper like this, something with a mystery, you need to be either more straightforward or just more inventive and more creative and more fun. This one's not that. So the overall plot leaves a lot to be desired. I thought Depp is pretty irritating. But then it kind of grew on me a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. I think I just kind of settled in, being well, I have to tell myself that this is I have to watch another hour 45 minutes. You know what I mean? I don't know. See, like, I think I went in like expecting it is like the absolute like be all end all of cinema as we know it, and I just thought it was like, okay, like whatever. Like this was, I got some laughs out of me. I'm not gonna lie. There's a few certain gags that got me, and I wrote here. Okay, this is gonna sound like high praise, but it's not. I promise you. Okay, let's just hear me out. Hear me out. Maybe you'll see where I'm getting with this. This is like Wes Anderson, but without the artistry or vision. Okay. Do you know what I'm trying to get there? Like, yeah, I mean, it's filled with quirk and weird cartoonish characters, but it doesn't really work. And the reason why it doesn't work to me is the reason why Dumb and Dumber works. Dumb and Dumber, the original film by the Farrelly brothers, works because everyone is normal except for your two main characters. Mm-hmm. Your two main characters are wacky and stupid and idiots, and the joke is everybody reacting to them. Now, going back to Pirates, it's the fun thing about Jack Sparrow is everybody's reacting to him. Mm-hmm. In this movie, everybody is cartoonish. Yeah. That it just does become grating. Like it should be Mortdecai.
And nobody reacts to Mortdecai as if he's weird.
Yeah, and that's the biggest problem. Like Mortdecai it should be this wacky fish out of water story, but everybody seems like they're heightened and they're all like, what none of them are like looking at him being like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? Yeah, and that's my problem with it, and that's why a lot of the humor doesn't work. I agree with you. But I guess I just, for the sake of the podcast, for the sake of being a franchise starter, yeah, absolutely not. This is like a failure beyond failures to get me interested to see more of Charlie Mortdecai. I agree with that completely. But yeah. I think if this is just a movie that you threw on like I did, and maybe my parents watched it, they'd be like, yeah, that was all right, and then be just in one ear, out the other. But yes, for the sake of failure to franchise, it's really, really bad. I was amused to a point.
I can get that, but I will say, like, to your point, yeah, it's misguided is what it is.
Yeah.
Because the problem is, you just alluded to this, I'm glad you brought this up. Every other main character in this, so our other main characters are Mordecai's wife, played by Gwyneth Paltrow, his manservant, Jock, played by Paul Bettany, and the former college associate, now turned detective, who occasionally conscripts him into adventure, played by Ewan McGregor. And the problem is, all three of those characters already have long-lasting relationships with Mortdecai.
Yes.
So they're all so used to him that they, as we just said, they don't respond to him as the bizarre, otherworldly character that the movie treats him as, and that Johnny Depp is playing him as. So when you said you like what Johnny Depp is going for in his, or you kind of get it, I'll say this for Johnny Depp's performance. It's a committed performance. Like, he came in with an idea, and he like leans into it. And I actually think this character could have been funny in a movie that treats this character the right way. I think the movie and the plot is not doing the character any favors, and that unfortunately makes Johnny Depp's performance worse because he doesn't have anything to bounce the comedic elements of this character off of, because no one's giving that to him. And Chris, I'm so glad you brought up the Wes Anderson thing, because and I'll use the Dumb and Dumber one too, because I know I'm much more of a Wes Anderson fan than you are.
Sure. But
imagine this movie directed by Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
Like this cast, right? The exact same cast, same characters, give Mordecai's little mustache, but filter this movie through Wes Anderson's quirky, bizarre sensibility. And suddenly you have a movie, right? Or, as you said, imagine this movie made by 1990s Farrelly brothers.
Exactly.
That much dumber, right? So this movie is unfortunately right in the middle of that, right? And that's where, like you said, that's why it becomes just like, it's to me it was like aggressively meh. It sounds like for you it's just meh, but I think we both fall on we ultimately fall on two different scales of meh. That's the problem.
That should have been on the poster. Two different scales of meh. Well, and you're nailing it by saying even like I'm going to bring up Austin Powers as well.
Yes.
Austin Powers, the trilogy, in my opinion, I love. We don't have to litigate the what you feel like even about Goldmember, but I think the first one is just a masterpiece in parody. It's unbelievable, and I think Austin Powers pushed the limits of PG-13.
I'm sorry, sir.
Well, I won't lie to you. Cards are not my bag, baby. Allow myself to introduce myself. My name is Richie Cunningham, and this is my wife, Oprah.
My name is number 2. This is my Italian confidential secretary. Her name is Alata. Alata for China.
And everybody around him reacted to Austin being this fish out of water. Now, this movie, again, let's go back to what we said. It was designed as a rated R film. What I did not say was that they changed the digital release to be PG-13. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure what version we saw, because we saw, obviously, the digital version. I'm sure, Trev, you didn't go find it in the store to buy it. We probably just rented it, of course. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know what we saw, but there's glimpses of rated R material, but it doesn't go far enough to make it memorable or that funny. And I think Austin Powers really did that. Austin Powers, I mean, it's borderline rated R. You know, like there's sex scene, there's half nudity, there's I don't think there's a single F-bomb though. That's one thing that they don't have. But I think to be memorable, even on the rating scale, to get people to kind of feel uncomfortably, funny in their seats, this one just kind of falls flat. Like you're saying.
You do wonder, like, even watching it, I'm like, why? Like, I don't understand. This movie should have been PG-13 from the beginning.
Yeah.
There's nothing about this character or this plot or this movie, this idea of a franchise that needs to be raunchy or like needs to be aiming for adult humor at all, right?
Yeah.
And Chris, because you brought up Austin Powers, I'm going to do a little bit of an offshoot here. Obviously, one of Mike Myers' biggest comedic influences, or probably the biggest, is Peter Sellers, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's perfect because that allows me to now, as I promised earlier, bring up Pink Panther again. Because the Lionsgate, president, he brought this up. And I don't know about you, Chris, and I'm not sure. I know, so you believe that movies started in 1995, so you probably think the Pink Panther with Steve Martin was the beginning of the series. But actually, before the Steve Martin films, there was a string of Pink Panther films running through the 60s and 70s, starring Peter Sellers as Inspector Clouseau. And clearly that like heavily influenced Mike Myers, and there's no doubt that heavily influenced what Johnny Depp is going for here.
Yeah.
Like that character, he's trying to do his version of Clouseau. But this speaks to another point we made earlier. So, Chris, I don't expect you to notice, and that's totally fine. I'm like a huge Pink Panther fan. I love the series. And the odd thing about that series, which often gets forgotten by some people, is the first movie, 1963's The Pink Panther, was not meant to be a star vehicle for Peter Sellers. It was meant to be, they thought it was going to start a franchise about the other main character, played by David Niven, who is the jewel thief who's trying to steal the Pink Panther diamond. And when they got on set, what Peter Sellers was doing as Clouseau was so funny and everyone was enjoying it that on set they started like beefing his part up. But even still, when you watch the movie today, he's not the main character. They just give him, he's got some scenes, some scene-stealing sequences, but he was just the character that popped. And then 1 year later, they wanted to make another movie called A Shot in the Dark, based on a kind of a well-known murder mystery play. And because people liked Clouseau so much in Pink Panther, and because they already had Peter Sellers attached to this picture, they said, well, what if we just change this into Clouseau and make this a sequel to Pink Panther? Mm-hmm. And so they did that. And now suddenly you have a franchise, right? So I guess the point I'm making is this is like what we said about Jack Sparrow. Jack Sparrow, we fell in love with because he was a side character and he wasn't rammed down our throats from the beginning. And that's true Clouseau, because Clouseau is a minor character of the Pink Panther. He's the main character in A Shot in the Dark, but everything that's more exaggerated about him and funnier doesn't even necessarily pop to the same degree in that film yet. It's not until 1975's The Return of the Pink Panther, where Sellers really adopts the super exaggerated French accent, where it becomes very, very heavily slapstick. So that's a franchise that took its time, developed the character, kept giving us a little bit more of him, and eventually got to a point where now we love this character because he's grown on us, and it's allowed Peter Sellers to make the character goofier as he goes along. This is Johnny Depp coming in guns a-blazing from the very beginning and going like, look at my mustache, isn't it funny? And they're like, no, not really. And can we talk about the mustache now? I think we have to, right? Because I mentioned earlier one joke throughout the movie. This movie should have just been called Mustache, because I've never seen a movie so obsessed with thinking the character's facial hair is funny. But boy, howdy, does this movie think that mustache is funny.
Okay, I think it's a little amusing, okay? And I think the reason it's amusing is because we mentioned... I know we mentioned Gwyneth Paltrow plays his wife, and there's this one scene that I actually thought was really funny, and that's just like he comes in and he has this new mustache after being away for a long time, and Joanna's like full hatred for him, that doesn't even want to touch him, doesn't want to be sexual with him whatsoever because she hates it so much, and having this gag reflex every single time she goes in for a kiss to him, it got me to laugh a solid amount. I did like that. I'm a sucker for that stuff.
No. Steady yourself.
I beg you, darling, please. You know I have a sympathetic gag reflex.
Oh, God. It's unbearable.
You will get used to it, I promise.
Why should I have to?
And I think it works to a point. They come back to it too much. I agree. I think it should be kind of like a rule of 3 type thing, like, you know, how comedy, but this one goes, you know, does it 7 or 8, 9, 10 times.
Yeah.
So it starts to be grating. But the first time it does, and honestly, the last time it does, it got me pretty good as well. I don't know about you. I don't want to spoil it. If you're people that are going to rush out to see Mortdecai now. But the last time it does it, it got me to like, I burst out like a good chuckle.
If we get 4 people to watch Mortdecai, we've doubled its audience. So... What's also a sidebar? What's the deal with this weird mustache fascination too with like capers? Because isn't that like a thing with the Orient Express, that movie by Kenneth Branagh? Yeah, Poirot, of course, the played by Kenneth Branagh most recently, the detective in Death on the Nile and Murder on the Orient Express, is known for having a very distinctive mustache. You know, previous versions of him in previous like film and TV adaptations always does. Clouseau has a mustache. I guess you're right. They like Farce. Loves mustaches, but the thing is, like with those characters, they just let the mustache be there and be kind of like, you know, exaggerated. They don't constantly bring attention to it. Like this movie makes it into a plot point, right? Like this movie like is the idea is he's just recently grown the mustache, and the movie literally starts with him. The very first scene, by the way, such a ripoff of the Temple of Doom opening scene. Like it's like that's exactly what they're aiming for. But it's him sitting at a table with people he's trying to do like an art deal with. And the very first dialogue we hear in the movie is him telling people about how he just grew his mustache and how he loves the mustache and he thinks it like completes this thing that was missing in him. And that's just like, then the movie is just off and running with him consistently talking about how much he loves this mustache. I don't know. I agree. Like maybe if it was just 3 times, but I just got sick of it. And I never thought it was very funny. And then you even go look at like the marketing for this movie. And I'm sure you saw like, there was a string of character posters for this that were all the other characters with the same mustache. Like Gwyneth Paltrow with the mustache, Olivia Munn with the mustache. It's like, okay, I guess we get it. Also, though, if you live in like a metropolitan city, you go to a brewery, you've already seen this mustache. The bartender probably had it. So it's not like this is like a true hipster mustache. It's not like anything so outlandish that it's worth what the movie's trying to do with it.
But you know that hipster bartender definitely wants to talk about his mustache.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess this movie's realistic. Yeah. You know what? Can I quickly say, because I want to keep ripping into it, and because I will. I will say this, because you brought up the wife character. I will say, for as much as I aggressively did not like this, one element I'll give it credit for is it is very, very rare that you see a movie where the 2 leads are a married couple that don't really have too much strife throughout the film. There's a little bit, right? There's a little bit of jealousy on his side because we find out that Ewan McGregor's character, the detective who works with them, was a college friend of theirs who had a huge crush on Gwyneth Paltrow and still does. So he's upset that Gwyneth Paltrow chose Mortdecai, and he is like still madly in love with her, and Mortdecai knows that. And so there's like a little bit of jealousy, but they never do the thing where like they break them up midway through the movie or anything. She is always trying to help her husband. I mean, clearly it's because she wants to figure out how to get them out of debt. You know, that's the plot point.
Yeah.
But I did like that it's actually about a married couple that works together. So that's like one thing where I'd say in a better version of this franchise, I would give that even more credit. But if I'm trying to find things to be generous about here, I quite liked that actually.
Yeah, I agree. I actually liked the little rivalry of the 2 of them as well for her love and affection, even though Mortdecai is pretty confident that, you know, I mean, he married her. You know, he's like, my wife's, you know, 100% for me. So I do like that. And I think we always talk about this, maybe publicly, but definitely privately, about how the show Brooklyn Nine-Nine is just one of the best, ultimately positive comedies ever made. And how the 2 main characters and their love life are never a plot point to cause drama. as in the
fake
sense of
drama,
fake drama, like they did in The Office. We always talk about how The Office was a great show until they really didn't know what to do with Jim and Pam anymore, so they made them fight a lot. And it was like, well, these are not the characters. They would never do that. And it is nice to see in this movie right away that Gwyneth Paltrow, Joanna, loves Charlie, is sexually attracted to him, does want to have a great life with him, but needs to get the money and shave the fucking mustache.
My love, you are killing me, please.
It looked like you have a vagina on your face.
Surely you mean the pubic hair above a vagina.
And I think it's a solid plot point. Again, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna keep going back saying this movie is amusing. You know, like it's not hilarious. It's not trash, as for me personally, but I do think it's just sort of a bunch of scenes that amused me.
It's like I wish I could be with you, because I feel like this movie keeps walking up to the edge of maybe being amusing and just like never quite getting there. Like even on the level of like I'm trying to just figure out like the Mortdecai character and like how much I could ever be into this franchise. So like I know it is based on a series of books that obviously had an audience. You don't get like 5 books if nobody read the first one, you know. But I don't know. There was like, for me, maybe this ties into why I kept glossing over and why I was having a hard time. There was like just this weird detachment about is the art dealing world really this interesting? You know, and like I don't know that speaks to the plot, right? Do you, because like you mentioned, I think you do agree with me. This plot is too complicated, right?
Yes. And this is in my notes here too. Like, because again, I it's not that I hate this character or hate this world. I think we're pigeonholed into the world of art.
Yes.
And I don't give a shit about the world of art. And maybe that's me, but I think this isn't ripe for a caper 5 times. You know what I mean? Like if this was going to be the big mega franchise starter that they wanted it to be, I don't know if I would have wanted to watch a trilogy of Mortdecai figuring out art dealer shit. You know what I mean? Like maybe there's murder mysteries within it. I have no idea. I haven't done the research into the books, but I think it's too pigeonholed into a world that I find disinteresting. And ultimately, like you said, way too convoluted. This movie's way too convoluted. All of a sudden, we're like 20 minutes out from the end of it, and Jeff Goldblum shows up, and it's like, and I love me some Goldblum.
Yeah,
and,
but this is a real waste of Goldblum.
Oh yeah, he's there for like a scene and a half, and he doesn't do any Goldblum-y things. He's just kind of like any guy. The idea of getting to see Goldblum bounce off of Johnny Depp, that's so exciting, and this is a. You know what you shouldn't have in Mortdecai is an understated Jeff Goldblum performance, but that's what we get, And like to your point, like about the thing about being hampered by the art world of it. Here's the other problem with it. Here's why I think it's doing a disservice to the character of Mortdecai, because this goes back to what we were just saying earlier. Mortdecai is a aristocratic upper class twit, essentially, right? Which is an old school, tried and true, stereotypical British comic character. The comedy of those characters usually comes from taking that character and putting them into social situations where they're out of place. But this entire movie takes place in the art forgery and underground art world where, again, just as I said with the other main characters, everyone knows of Mortdecai or everyone operates on Mortdecai's level. You know, about halfway through the movie, Ewan McGregor, just to get Mortdecai out of the way so he can kind of spend more time with his wife, sends Mortdecai to America, like as part of the case. And he specifically sends him to LA. And there was a twinge in me where I thought, okay, now we're going to get to like what is probably going to be the funny stuff, because now you're sending Mortdecai to LA, and this is going to turn into a comedy about this like really upper crust British guy in LA, and it's going to be like this culture clash comedy, which usually works. There's like 2 jokes like that.
Checking in.
I am Mortdecai, Lord of Silverdale. I should like to request a bucket of ice, do not disturb sign, and a bulldozer.
Checking in.
Yeah, we're checking in.
I suspect that I may need to redecorate.
Room 326 overlooks the pool.
So all I must do is show up, and I'm presented with a credit card. No wonder your country's in financial ruin.
Do you need help with your bags?
No, I do not need help with my bags. I have a fucking manservant. Strange country.
You know, like that's where I got kind of confused. Where I'm like, why is this movie about Mortdecai being surrounded by other characters from the same world? Shouldn't this be kind of more of a fish out of water movie? And I know it is, like, the plot from this is pretty much taken from the first book, but this is where you should kind of rewrite things and say, oh, if Mortdecai is going to be funny, we need to put him in situations where everybody would be like, what is the deal with this guy? And instead, he's constantly interacting with characters who already know him and exist in his world and just don't think he's that strange.
Well, and that's where my... I don't want to use the word favorite moments in the movie happen, but it's like when he goes to LA, that's when the movie kind of kicks into a gear. Not the gear, but briefly, gear. Yeah. And, he doesn't want to be there. He doesn't like what's going on. He doesn't like his hotel. He, even just his relationship with Jock. I first of all, you didn't like Jock with Paul Bettany? I thought that was pretty funny. To back up, Paul Bettany plays Jock, Charlie's manservant and bodyguard. And I thought it was really funny that Jock has like complete and total devotion for his boss, who is an eccentric coward who manages to actually hurt Jock at all times.
You know what,
I thought that was funny.
Chris, here's what I'll say, because you brought that up, and I'll say I get why it's meant to be funny. I don't know that it ever worked for me. However, I will just admit I lied earlier. I said I never laughed. You just reminded me there was one thing that got a laugh out of me, and it does come from the Jock Mortdecai relationship, and I'm guessing it made you laugh too. It's in the trailer. It is the scene where they're out skeet shooting, and Mortdecai accidentally shoots Jock.
Yeah.
Oh, afraid I have more problems with these damn things. Oh, sandwich. I believe I've just shot Jock.
Quite.
Man down! Man down!
Just the pure, the way it's filmed, that's a good visual joke. I'm sorry, if you shoot someone in close range with a shotgun and they go flying out of frame, and then when Mordecai's reaction is, I believe I shot Jock, that did make me laugh, I have to say. Yeah. And yes, I get the idea of overall why that's meant to be funny, this idea of Jock is deeply invested in him, seems to love Mortdecai. Again, I would have liked to have known why. This speaks again to me where I feel like why this feels like Mortdecai 4. I don't really understand this relationship, but I wish they had committed to it a little bit more. I'm that kind of person. I don't know if you'll agree with this. Eventually, the movie does that thing, and this is where I felt like this is the Hollywood element of it. There comes a moment later in the film where, and we don't have to get so into the weeds here because I can't summarize this plot, but there is a moment where Jock is fighting some bad guys, and they have Jock pinned up against a wall, and they're going to cut off some of his fingers. And Mortdecai is on a kitty, is around the corner from him, and Jock can see Mortdecai, and Mortdecai knows that Jock's fingers are about to be cut off, and he's basically saying I can't help you, Jock. I know you're about to cut your fingers off, but I have to go get the other bad guy. And Jock is just no, I understand, sir. The way they're playing that is kind of funny. But then the movie does that Hollywood thing where Mortdecai does save him. I'm sure that doesn't bother a lot of people, but I really was oh man, I wish they just committed the bit and had Mortdecai leave and had Jock somehow get out of it otherwise. I know it's Hollywood, but it's oh man, you got to do the thing where no, actually Mortdecai does love Jock, and actually when it comes to it, he will save him. I was I don't know, you already had him shoot him 3 times this movie. Just go whole hog on it.
Yeah, he shows up just every scene. He's more and more maimed. You know, every time you see him, he's lost a finger. He's he's bruised eye. His ears cut off, and it's all good, sir. I got you. I agree with that. That would be funnier for sure.
Yeah, I also don't know. I want to hear from you on this because you said you liked it. I don't know what I thought of Paul Bettany's performance in this. I didn't necessarily think it was bad, but I didn't know if I felt like he was bringing anything to make this character as funny as the script seemed to think he was. I don't know. Did you think he seemed... I don't know. I felt like he was underplaying it somewhat, and maybe that's meant to be the joke, but because the whole ongoing joke with Jock is he's hypersexual, and essentially every woman he encounters he ends up sleeping with. I'm pretty sure enough where there was a moment where they're on an airplane and Jock ends up sleeping with a woman, or fucking a woman, I should just say. Why am I being so clean about it? But he ends up having sex with her in the airplane bathroom, and then you find out that that's a new mom on the plane with her husband, and I was kind of oh, that makes me not like Jock very much, but okay.
Good God, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I just felt like he was underplaying it a little bit. What did you think?
I guess I did laugh at that. I was whoa, wow. They went there. But I kind of liked how that is Jock's superpower. He's just every woman that sees him, they'll sleep with him. And he doesn't care. You know what I mean? Like that's what he is. He only cares about Mortdecai. He only cares about Charlie and keeping him safe, and that's his whole lot in life. And along the way, he just bangs chicks, you know, and like that's his defining characteristic. And I do like the comment, you know, the way Charlie would react to it, you know, like the good God, man, like just calm yourself. I don't know. I found it amusing. It's I thought it got genuine laughs out of me. And to go back to what you're saying about his performance, I think it does work with his gruff, stoic voice. And because he's just not emotional to what he's doing, he's like a robot almost. And it plays good with Charlie's complete eccentricism. You know, he's so wild and zany that because Jock is so stoic and gruff, he's almost exactly, he is a cartoon character, you know, but just the opposite spectrum. And them together make for a nice comedic, cartoonish couple. But the problem is, again, everybody around them is also cartoonish.
Yeah.
I'm afraid you are barking up the wrong Englishman, comrade.
Vladimir, please to take Mr. Mortdecai's trousers down.
Well, perhaps we can work something out. What if I find it for you? Say 30% finder's fee. What?
Open your balls.
I shan't. What does that even mean?
So,
well, you know what this movie could have used is, and I wouldn't typically advocate for this because this actually goes against like what I normally like, but I actually think it would have suited this movie well. This movie has a voiceover, which to me felt unnecessary and really felt like, I don't know if it was always intended, but it did feel like, oh my God, we've made a very complicated movie. Let's have Mortdecai come in every once in a while and just tell us what we're seeing. Essentially, they don't overuse it, but it pops up enough to where it's like we don't need that. But he tells us about Jock, right? Anytime we meet a new character, Mortdecai's voiceover tells us who his character is and their relation to him, and like we get a flashback of showing the moment that Alistair found out that Gwyneth Paltrow and I can't remember her name, so I'm just gonna keep calling her Gwyneth Paltrow. But when he found out the woman he loves was sleeping with Mortdecai in college, and he tells us about how Jock sleeps with all these women, and we have a brief flashback to that. I think we actually needed some flashbacks of like Jock and Mortdecai meeting, and maybe they were so cocky that they felt like eventually we're going to do Mortdecai Begins, right? Well, man, we'll do like the prequel movie. But I think actually you needed like one or two like very silly flashback sequences to show us their initial meeting, come up with some ridiculous, crazy scenario to show why Jock is so indebted to this man and why he's so willing to risk life and limb for him. Because obviously Mortdecai is, you know, Mortdecai does care for Jock. It's never like an antagonistic relationship, but he does hurt him a lot accidentally. So show me in a silly flashback why these two are together. I think the movie actually needed that and doesn't have it.
I completely agree with you. I think there is a need for a little bit of an origin story. Not feature length, but like you said, maybe 2 flashbacks of that would be nice. Like how they even met. You know, like almost like a meet cute. You can even like make it a joke like that, like almost like a romantic comedy in a sense, because like the movie is wild and zany that it would work in the context of the film. So I'm totally down with that. Yeah, 100%.
I'm also surprised that they don't use Jock's like the fact that he seduces every woman and sleeps with everyone. They never use that as like a plot point. It's just something that keeps happening, but it's
which
never
I think
used...
is funnier, in my opinion.
Okay, yeah. I don't know. I have no opinion on it necessarily. I was just surprised. I was just like, if there's one area where this movie has restraint, it's in that decision, right? To like never have it turn on. Oh, Jock has to seduce someone. In fact, obviously, we haven't even mentioned the other kind of key cast member here, because this is I like to say this movie has a very talented cast and Olivia Munn. Now. I know we don't like. Here's the thing. I don't know if listeners know, but you and I, we don't like to talk bad about actors.
No, we don't.
We hate it. We do not like to say anything bad about actors. Olivia Munn, not the best on screen. When you say like not the most charismatic performer, and she ends up being revealed as like one of the main villains. That was obviously where I thought the Jock thing was going to come into play, because we were told before we even meet her that her character is a nymphomaniac. And you're like, well, all right, I get where this is heading. But instead they play it that she's very into Mortdecai. Like that's who she wants to like sleep with. And they basically just use that just to have some comedic strife between him and his wife. But so that was the restraint. The fact that they never had Jock and her together, you know, surprise, surprise.
Yeah, Olivia Munn is an interesting career. Mm-hmm. I mean, interesting to... I mean, she's disinteresting or uninteresting, but her career is an interesting one. Going from Attack the Show on G4 to X-Men, Apocalypse.
Well, don't forget about her small little run as like a Daily Show correspondent.
And now she plays the baby mama to John Mulaney.
Yeah. Yeah. She, that's the thing too, like, not to keep crapping on her performance in this, but I will say it does speak to another problem this movie has, is that we keep talking about how all these cartoonish characters, how the main characters are all kind of, overly exaggerated cartoon characters, but they forgot to do that with the villains. Mm-hmm. The villains are not memorable or interesting, or as they're the villain. If there's one other character that I would like to be very silly in this, it should be whoever the main villain is.
Well, that's why when Jeff Goldblum shows up, I was like, oh wow! I didn't watch the trailer before, so I was like, holy shit, Jeff Goldblum's in this, and I was like, oh my god, he seems like he's the villain. This is gonna be amazing, and he's gone.
Yep.
Yeah, and if there's one guy to play that part that you want, that's him. Be an eccentric, crazy villain. Like, I mean, we saw him 2 years later in Thor Ragnarok. That's what I was expecting, honestly, when I saw him, and he plays it so straight. It's so strange to see a Jeff Goldblum performance played so straight in a movie where everybody is an eccentric weirdo. Mm-hmm. That's the guy. That's the guy you say, hey, tone it down, Jeff.
Yeah, it's right. Yeah, you're dead right that like Jeff Goldblum. If Jeff Goldblum had been revealed as like the main villain, the one pulling all the strings, and was allowed to go full Goldblum, to see Johnny Depp as Mortdecai against like full Goldblum, you would have had something.
Yeah.
Instead, they pit Mortdecai and his like partners against the most like nondescript, boring villains. Like I said, I couldn't really follow the story. I know they're just trying to get this painting because of like Nazi gold or whatever, but it's way more complicated than that. Like, trust me, if you haven't seen this movie, you're gonna thank God I told you that, because the movie's like the movie's really is making it hard to follow. But I would forgive that, I guess, if the villains were entertaining, which they're not. Like the main villain in this, I don't even know who that actor was. I could look it up right now, but I'm just not going to bother. I'm sorry. But, he gets like a little sword fight with Mortdecai at the end and everything, but I just didn't care. Like, he wasn't interesting to me. I don't know. Like, if, again, you want to start a franchise, you can't just give me the main character being funny, populate him with characters that are all kind of compelling.
Mm-hmm. Like, there's nothing necessarily wrong with having a stupid comedy, and that's kind of what I'm, I guess, more forgiving of right now, because, we've said this before in a lot of the horror movies that we talk about, that there's two genres that are very difficult, right? Is horror movies and comedy. Mm-hmm. And I think because both elicit such a visceral reaction, and you can't really, it's a manipulative reaction from the filmmaker, but also it relies so heavily on like such subjectivity, and I think when a movie like this, being a stupid comedy, it either hits you or it doesn't. But I think because it's even eliciting such a meh response from me, who I'm the more positive one on the movie, just tells you where, like, who was this for? Mm-hmm. Who was it for? You thought it was it was just a dumpster fire, and that's totally fair. I can't even really argue against that. You know what I mean? All I can say is, oh well, I got a few chuckles out of it, and I found it amusing.
Yeah.
But again, who was gonna go see Mortdecai and saying, oh my God, I cannot wait to see the saga, the Mortdecai saga? Yeah. Who knows? Who knows?
Because I'll make an effort to never watch this again. So that's kind of how I feel. But I mean, here's the thing. I don't disagree with you that there's nothing wrong with a dumb comedy. I love a dumb comedy, and I love dumb, over-the-top farces. One of my all-time, probably honestly in my like top 20, if not top 10, certainly in my top 10 most rewatched movies, is Clue. I love Clue, which is like a super silly, over-the-top farce murder mystery, which is like what this is ultimately trying to be. I don't think this movie is stupid enough. Isn't that where you kind of agree? Right. Like, that's the problem. Is it's taking a very dumb character and plopping him down into a pedestrian murder mystery story, and the movie needs to be dumber. That's what I mean by his stupidity, and his bizarre, outlandish behavior needs to be exaggerated more and needs to be played against characters who are reacting to it more. Because here's the thing, I can picture a version of Austin Powers that doesn't work at all because you just come up with the idea of Mike Myers as Austin Powers and you go, that's enough. That character's funny. But everything Mike Myers does in that movie, the same mannerisms, the same lines, you can plop that character down into a story that's not involving and other characters that aren't funny, and that character would just become grating and annoying. Austin Powers works because everything around the character is also working.
Yes.
Right? This definitely feels, and I'm not the first person to see this. I saw this said in multiple reviews, so I'm not taking credit for this. This really does feel like, at a certain point, they said, people love Johnny Depp. We know he can be funny as Jack Sparrow. People like the character. If we give him a funny mustache, our work is done. Like, it really just feels like they were done at that point. They're like, give him the mustache, make that the main joke. We'll have him with the mustache in the poster. Like, the mustache will be like, they clearly like look at the marketing. To them, the mustache was the iconic element of this, and they kind of stopped there. They didn't work as much as they should have on the script. They didn't work hard enough on the backstory of the character or making us understand who his character is in the marketing. They just felt like we would automatically laugh because Johnny Depp is playing a twit. And it really did not work for me.
Mm-hmm. And going back to what you were saying about Austin Powers, like I love the trilogy, like so near and dear. But I know a lot of people that look down on Goldmember, right?
Yeah, I'm one of them. Yeah.
And you're one of them, yeah. And
don't play the laughing boy. There are only two things I can't stand in this world: people who are intolerant of other people's cultures, and the Dutch.
What?
Again, we don't need to go into specifics, but from what you're saying, I understand why people don't like Goldmember, because every character is crazy. You know, every character is wild. Everything is just
it's the one where they flew too close to the sun. Yeah, they pushed it too far. Yep.
There's just so much crazy zaniness that the jokes become just pedestrian. And I think the first movie is again a masterclass in parody, putting a fish out of water story, and it's this isn't the Austin Powers cast, but I think that's that in Dumb and Dumber. I always go back to Dumb and Dumber because me and my brother talk about this a lot of why that sequel is such a piece of shit. The Dumb and Dumber sequel is so terrible, and it's because everybody is just like them, and it just doesn't work. The first movie is a masterpiece in comedy to me. Dumb and Dumber is seminal to the way my humor works, and growing up with that, it hit me at the perfect age. I just absolutely love that movie. Still to this day, it's a classic, right? Mm-hmm. And everybody around them is just insane. My favorite joke from Dumb and Dumber, if you'll just let me, is when they're at the end there. Spoilers for Dumb and Dumber. But at the end there, when Harry gets shot, right? He gets shot, and he goes on the bed, and he falls down. And Lloyd's like, oh, my God, you bastard. You killed my friend. And then, like, Harry jumps up and shoots the bad guy. And then they're like, he goes, Harry, you're alive. And then Harry's like, yeah, I was downstairs, and I saw the cop, and she came up to me, and she goes, and then she strapped this bulletproof vest on me. And then Lloyd's like, what if they shot you in the face? And then Harry goes, yeah, why they shot me in the face? And then the cop goes, that's a chance we're willing to take.
Can I tell you my favorite joke from Dumb and Dumber? Because it's going to be very much this is a moment where I'm going to get judged by you and the audience. Because this very much says something to me. Like the funniest thing in that entire movie is the fact that they sell a decapitated bird just tape his head back on and sell it to the blind kid. And when they show the blind kid stroking the bird, pretty birdie, and it's just got its head taped back on. Oh, man. I'm a horrible person, and that makes me laugh.
I think I'll say on a regular basis when I'm just, like, listing things off, like, this is happening, our pets' heads are falling off.
You made me think of another Jim Carrey movie, and that's because I know we've already said this, but I want to reiterate it with a couple examples that I think highlight what we mean. So, again, if people haven't got our point, even though I'm sure they have... this movie was clearly influenced by the Pink Panther, right? So if you watch those Pink Panther movies, the whole idea is that Clouseau is so unbelievably dumb, and you can't, and like everybody around him is like, what is the deal with this guy, right? His own boss hates him so much that the kind of comedic through line of the film is his boss is trying to get him killed in his investigations because he just doesn't want to deal with him anymore. The other Jim Carrey movie I was thinking of was Ace Ventura. Ace Ventura is ridiculous. He's a ridiculous human being. No human being like that exists. And every character in the movie hates him or is baffled by him. You think of the early Adam Sandler movies that I love, Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore. All these characters, like, what is the deal with this person? So yes, again, this is what this movie is missing is as much as Paul Bettany, I think he's kind of underplaying it. Whatever. I think for what she's asked to do, Gwyneth Paltrow, who is, whatever you think about Gwyneth Paltrow, is like can be a very annoying person, I think, in real life. But I actually really always like Gwyneth Paltrow as an on-screen performer. I don't get people who give her a hard time in that degree. I think what she's given to do here, she's fine. Like I said, I like the relationship between her and Mortdecai. I think Ewan McGregor, again, I feel like I wish there was more with his character. I think he is not given a lot either. But I'm not putting it on any of them. It's the script that's not allowing these characters to react to Mortdecai in a way that's memorable. So that I know this is like my 10th time saying it, but that's the movie's failing. Is I walk away not finding the character interesting and not seeing him as a franchise lead because you didn't allow the characters to act like he was a franchise lead and like be so confused or baffled by him to make him sillier. Like, it's like, what am I, if you're going to do sequels to this, I'm just going to keep watching more people be like, oh, there's Mortdecai, like, and him just up to his normal tricks. And like, I don't know, I also couldn't figure out how competent he's supposed to be. Like, that's the movie kind of goes back and forth, and sometimes he seems really incompetent, and sometimes he really seems like he knows what he's doing. So like the movie couldn't seem to find a through line with him either. Did you agree with that? Like sometimes he's really got his shit together, and like sometimes he doesn't. And it's like, man, pick a lane, movie.
I agree, and I'm gonna go back to, remember I brought up The Office and Jim and Pam, right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna make another analogy to clear what you're saying as well, is that in the early season of The Office, the American version, when the show was good, Michael Scott is an absolute moron, right? Yeah. And everybody around him is annoyed by him and hate him. Once again, the through line of what we're saying. But the one thing I thought was so brilliant about The Office, the US one, for the first maybe 3 to 4 seasons, is that when it came to the sales gig and managing his people and getting deals done, Michael Scott shined. And I think you understand, because the whole time you're wondering, well, how did this guy become the manager of this business? Because he's an absolute twat, right? But every once in a while, they would show him get people out of a jam or show how great of a salesperson he is. And I think that's one thing I love, that no matter how bad or stupid or idiotic or racist or whatever he would be, he was still good at his job. And I think this movie, Mortdecai, it doesn't do that enough. He should be the guy that if he's walking in, everybody's like, oh, Mortdecai's here. He'll solve he'll do what he needs to do. We hate the guy, but he knows what he's doing. And I think he's too much of a bumbling buffoon, even in his acts of investigation and in his work. So I think I would agree with you there. For sure. Yeah,
well, sometimes he is, and then sometimes he's not. Like I said, it's inconsistent. And like the only so we can start kind of winding down, Chris, unless you have like a lot more to say about Mortdecai. I
can go for 3 more hours if you want.
Okay. I took note of this, and I wrote down. So again, we were talking about how this is meant to be the beginning of the Mortdecai franchise, right? And this movie acts like we all know this character, acts like we love this character. We're going to continue to love this character. However, for being the first film and trying to throw us into this world of Mortdecai, here are some things we do not know about Mortdecai. Okay? I wrote down a list of them. We don't know where Mortdecai's wealth originally came from. We don't know why he's rich. We don't know why his wife fell in love with him at college. So we don't know like what it was about him that she initially was attracted to. We don't know how he met Jock. We already talked about that. We don't know the backstory of those two. And perhaps most importantly, we don't know why Mortdecai likes art. Or like what his connection to art is. So that's like 4 pretty crucial, important elements of the character that the movie never bothers to answer. And that's what I mean. Boy, I hate to summon this name because oh boy, I'm getting into dicey territory.
Don't say it 3 times.
But in the 80s, there was a movie called Leonard Part 6 starring Bill Cosby. I'm sorry. But the joke of Leonard Part 6, which
we got to put that, we got to put his name in all of our SEOs just to make sure the algorithms take us into a void.
Yeah, this just me mentioning him just demonetized this episode. It's a terrible movie. Don't watch it. But the comedic premise of the movie was that it's called Leonard Part 6, and they never made Leonard's 1 through 5. They made a movie, and she's like, this is the 6th one. And then you watch the movie, it's like, wow, this isn't very funny. And I almost feel like Mortdecai was like another example of that, where it's like, am I watching Mortdecai 6? Because there's a lot I don't get here. And so, yeah, this is the thing. Like, it needed more flashbacks, or needed to be an origin story, or it just needed to not have... This movie's too confident in itself. This is a movie that is very confident that we're just going to love this character and just accept him as he is. But nah, this character is too bizarre. Everything about this character is just so otherworldly. We need to find out more about him, and the movie's not providing it.
Do you think this movie is a success if it comes out in 2005?
I don't. No, I actually consider that too, because I know you're getting at, right? Was this so? This really hit at a point where people were just kind of turning on him in general. But I say that because, like I said, I kind of sat there stone faced, and I don't. That wasn't because it's not because of how I feel about Johnny Depp now. It's, I will still go back and I still love the Johnny Depp movies I watched, and if I watched something I hadn't seen before and it was funny, I'd like to think I would still find it funny, but. I think in 2005 this movie's still as unfunny as it is now, and I think it would still be, because you're asking if the exact same movie came out in 2005, right? But it's still making the same mistakes. It's still making the same mistake we said earlier about the pirate sequels, right? Of thinking a character should be put in the forefront when maybe the character works better as a side character or something. All the same mistakes would be there. It might not have been, the only difference is in 2005 it might not have debuted 9 at the box office. It might have come in at number 1 and then had a huge plummet in week 2 or something. So it might have had like a more level of forgiveness going into it. But yeah, I think this movie would have been a miscalculation and a backfire at any time. What do you think?
I don't know. I think I lean more to we probably would have got a sequel. I find at the time Johnny Depp was so hot. And everybody loved Jack Sparrow and loved his performance and would go see a Johnny Depp movie. And I think by 2015's, and especially after the string of bad movies he was doing, man, I think, we've seen way worse pieces of shit get sequels, And I just find maybe they would have greenlit it alone. I don't know. I think it was a little bit of a hate boner going on for Johnny Depp. Like you said, some of your friends maybe have that for him. I think in another timeline, this was at least marginally more successful.
Yeah, I think
you know what I mean. Like
it would have made more money, but now like there is a sick part of me that is imagining a world where Johnny Depp immediately cashes in his Pirates of the Caribbean 2003 chips to just immediately make Mortdecai. Right, like what?
Yeah.
What's the difference in his filmography if instead of following that with a string of because he goes from Pirates of the Caribbean into like Finding Neverland, which is very critically acclaimed, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which does well, more pirate sequels. But what if he had been like, nah, I'm doing Mortdecai right off the bat? Would everyone be like, oh, well, okay, never mind, forget about that. We forget about that pirates thing. I think we're already done with you. Yeah,
that's true. And honestly, what we've said for a long time on this podcast, privately, publicly, the idea of a movie star is kind of gone, and I think Jack Sparrow is the star.
Yeah.
People.
Well, he's interesting because I think there was a point where Johnny Depp was what we say, like if we're a movie star, there was a point where Johnny Depp could open a movie, and if Johnny Depp wanted to make a movie, because Mortdecai is still a part of that, right? Mortdecai is the last gasp of the blank check he got from being Jack Sparrow.
Yeah.
Where a studio would go like, oh, you're interested in this like British book series that 18 people have read in this country? Fine, we'll give you $60 million to make that. Right. So he was a star, but this movie is like the end of that. Right. This movie is the end of the run that actually destroys that. And then you get to a point where then he's kind of only marketable to kind of keep coming back to Jack Sparrow. I think he had a run. He's one of like the last ones to have a real run of like, the new Johnny Depp movie, because that's where Sweeney Todd falls. That's where Charlie and the Chocolate Factory falls. Yeah. But Mortdecai represents the end of it. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But
no, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's really all I had to say. I think we've lasted actually way longer than I thought we would.
I know. Yeah, I did not think we would have that much to say about this. But ultimately, I think that's because here's my final thought, and then we can wrap up. You can have your final thought as well. But as much as I was down on this, as much as I didn't like it, I will say that ultimately I think whether it's not the Johnny Depp of it all necessarily, it's not even the script of it all. This movie's biggest failing, and why I'm glad we talked about it, because this movie actually should become like kind of the bellwether for us in a sense, in that this is one of the prime examples of all the movies we've done of overconfidence of saying, like, you read that quote where they're just going like, Mortdecai. There you go, Mortdecai. That's the new franchise. We'll just name the movie after the character. We'll put his face in the poster. You're all gonna love this character so much. We're gonna make like 10 more of these. So this is like actually of all the movies we watch. I know the entire point of our show is every movie we watch is meant to start a franchise, but this is like to me one of the funniest examples of overconfidence and misguided calculations from the studio of going, we got it, man. All people want to see is Johnny Depp as a new character, and that's it. It's case closed. There's no way this isn't going to work. And then when you see the movie, you're like, Actually, there's a lot of it almost didn't work anyway. So that's why I think this movie is interesting and funny to talk about, because I think it's one of the, in more recent memory and even beyond, it's to me like this is one of the prime examples of, oh, you done fucked up in trying to make a franchise. You tried to trick us into caring about a character that you gave us no reason to.
Well, they gave us the tweets.
The tweets, yeah. And I don't know if you noticed, also he has a mustache. He has a funny mustache.
Yeah. Can you check right now? Is the Twitter account still live?
Chris, let me check on that live on the air. Let me see here. Chris, I can tell you that the last time our good buddy Mortdecai at Part-Time Rogue tweeted was on February 10th, 2020. Mortdecai retweeted an ad for the DVD and digital release of Knives Out.
That is unreal. That's unreal.
Yeah. So Mortdecai in character, like the Mortdecai character as Twitter, hasn't tweeted since May 19th, 2015. Yeah. At what point Mortdecai tweeted, "Happy wife, happy life, dance with nympho in front of wife, unhappy life." And there's a clip of the scene with him dancing with Olivia Munn and his wife walking in on them. And then after that, we only have 2 more tweets. One is the retweet for Knives Out. And in 2019, Mortdecai retweeted an ad for something called Florida Girls, a TV show on Pop TV. Never heard of it, but obviously assuming it's another Lionsgate property.
I love the idea that Charlie Mortdecai is a fan of Benoit Blanc. I do like that.
I just like no, it's not even that. It's that like because Charlie Mortdecai's broke, and even at the end of the movie, they're still like they still have money issues, right? He's just had to take work as an intern at Lionsgate, so he just works at Lionsgate now and has to promote their properties.
Well, on that note, that'll do it for Mortdecai 2015.
And no one is ever going to talk about this movie again. So that's why that's another reason we should have gone long, because this is probably the last conversation ever about this film.
Look forward to next episode, the Lega sequel to the National Lampoon's vacation movies called Vacation. In the long-standing history of Lega sequels or reboots or remakes or whatever, just naming a one-word title for reasons.
Oh, and Chris, you love your like Matrix like coincidences. I don't know if this falls into this for you, but you kept bringing up multiple times in this episode The Office. Hey, who stars in Vacation?
Oh, yeah. What's his name again?
that would be Ed Helms.
Yes, Ed Helms.
Yeah.
Anyway, follow along with us at F2F Pod. That's at F2 the number 2 F Pod on Twitter, Instagram, everything, all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. Throw us a star rating. That'd be awesome. And just join the tribe and hit that subscribe. And keep on with us on May the Farce be with you. We'll see how next episode goes, because this one was actually a lively conversation that I actually quite enjoyed this. Not that not actually like I don't enjoy your company, but like I do. I did think this was a good time where I think both of us were mortified to be Mortdecai'd.
How long did you have that in your pocket?
I swear to God, I just made that up. I swear on a stack of Bibles, everything that I've ever held dear.
Okay. Right.
That's one of my best.
Yeah. All right. I'll take your word for it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Shit. I have nothing there. Fuck.